Good evening, and thank you for joining us on 10 TV Plus for our general election coverage. I'm Doug Petcash. The votes are all cast and are now being counted. Results are coming in. Tonight, Ohioans are choosing mayors, city council members, and deciding whether to support school and library levies and bonds. And of course, two key measures that affect abortion access and recreational marijuana use. And we'll be able to bring you real-time results of those two issues and break them down county by county with our big board here today. Let's start with issue 1 right now. This is what we have so far, with 17% of the votes counted here in across the state of Ohio right now. Yes is about 59% on issue 1 to 41.3% no's. Now, this measure would establish an individual right to one's own reproductive medical treatment in the state's constitution. This includes, but is not limited to, abortion. Issue 1 would also create legal protections for any person or entity that assists a person with receiving reproductive medical treatment. The measure also would prohibit the state from burdening, penalizing, or prohibiting abortion before an unborn child is determined to be viable unless the state demonstrates that it is using the least restrictive means. Again, with 17% reporting, the yeses are ahead 58.7 to 41.3% on the all-important ballot issue, issue 1. Now, we also have issue 2 that we can take a look at. Kind of similar results right now, but the vote is tighter, as you can see here. This is statewide. Yeses have 55.7%, no's 44.3%. That's a difference of 151,489 votes, with about 1.3 million total votes cast, or counted, I should say, at this point. And that's 17% of precincts reporting about 33% estimated total vote at this time. We also have a couple of other big races that we could tell you about today, and those are, of course, the race for mayor of Columbus. This is the mayoral race going on between Andrew Ginther, who is running for a third term. He is being challenged by Joe Motil and several write-in candidates. Right now, current mayor Andrew Ginther has a pretty sizable lead at 65% to 34% write-ins, just at 1%, and this is the candidate leading now by 22,448 votes. Columbus City Schools, the state's largest school district, is also asking voters to support a nearly $100 million levy. If passed, it would cost taxpayers about $270 per $100,000 of taxable property value. Right now, yeses are in the lead in this one. Still, again, very early in the vote count. 54% yes, 46% no, a difference of just under 3,000 votes there in favor of the yeses. Also, I am just being told right now that there is now a check mark here by the yeses on issue 1, meaning that that race has been called. You can see it right here, 58.7%. So at this time, let's bring in our special guest in studio. I am joined by Paul Beck, who is a professor at Ohio State University, Academy Professor of Political Science, and Christopher Devine, Political Science Professor at the University of Dayton. Gentlemen, just happened, called the issue 1 race here. Yeses at 57.8%. At this point, still only a 36% total vote being counted. Paul, let's start with you. Any surprises or with the timing and how quickly the race has been called, or anything like that?
I think no surprises. I was expecting the yes side to win. The polls have been showing that, and in fact, the 57.8% is about what the polls were predicting would be the vote. And that's
not
kind
usually
of
that close, yeah.
Not usually, but sometimes, even though they, by a purist standard, are not the best of polls, but sometimes they're remarkably accurate. One thing that Chris and I were talking about as we were watching the returns come in is that there are about, at least at one point, were about 10,000 fewer people voting on the marijuana issue than were voting on issue 1, the abortion rights issue. And it may be because the marijuana issue is more complicated, but it's also a statute rather than a constitutional amendment. We don't know, and that may hold, but it may not hold as more votes come in.
And Chris, your initial impressions on the calling of the election here on issue 1?
Yeah, it's yet another thing that reminds me of the vote we had in August, where I forget the exact time, but I think the race was called right around now. We were discussing that. I think it was around 9 o'clock back in August. The numbers there, when you looked at the polling heading into it, I'm thinking of a July poll in particular that had come out, USA Today poll, at that time showed that this other issue in August about whether to raise the standards for constitutional amendments to 60%, that was rejected by voters, is rejected by a 57% vote. By the way, the polls there were dead on. They said 57%. And they were predicting about the same thing for this race. The polling, the Baldwin-Wallace poll that came out earlier this month, or last month, had it at, I think, 57 or 58% support. So what we're seeing is everything we would have predicted based on past trends, and that main one being the August vote. I think while that was about constitutional process, it seemed to function as something of a proxy for what people wanted to see happen with abortion. We're seeing, if this holds up, not just the outcome, but even the percentages, we would see a further parallel between those. And so we could have predicted today based on what happened 3 months ago.
Now, as I've mentioned, this is real-time results that we have coming in here, so you'll see numbers changing on the big board as we progress here through the show. And I want to zoom in a little bit right now and look more at Central Ohio and our market. Chris, I know you were particularly focused on Delaware County, but first let's see how Franklin County's vote goes. 77.4% yeses to 22.6%, but you were watching Delaware County, a little bit tighter there, but still substantially larger, 62.1 to 37.9%. What do you think's going on there?
So I just have to say first, again, go back to August. Franklin County, 75% to reject that issue one, which would be equivalent to voting yes on this issue one. I know it's confusing, but and for that matter, the county that was most supportive of the August raising the constitutional standards to 60% in August was Putnam County, 82%. Sorry to take us around the map here.
No, that's okay. We can do that.
So dark red there to the west, right? Putnam County. I have family there. I know it's a very conservative part of the state. That was the county that voted most heavily to raise the standards back in August for constitutional amendments. It was 82%. Tonight, 83%. And there, we in fact have 99% of the vote in. So that is basically a final count. Of course, we have provisionals coming in and such. Other counties we could look at right now, like we could look at Delaware, for instance, and if I'm not mistaken, we're still waiting on a good number of votes in that county or other surrounding counties. So, we'll see where they end up. But what we're seeing across the state, in the way that lines up with polling numbers, all these kinds of things is a strong parallel to what we saw in August. So Delaware County, if it follows the pattern from August, could very well vote yes on this. And we're talking about a county that's traditionally been pretty Republican, has been loosening up on that recently, become something more of a swing county. But that's the kind of county where you look, we have several counties in the state, not a lot, but about 7 of them. Big cities, think Cuyahoga County around Cleveland, Franklin for Columbus, Hamilton for Cincinnati, plus we have Athens, of course, very rural, but we have a big college town there. We have certain states that are pretty much reliably going to vote either for Democrats or in this case for more liberal policy position. The change here, the difference that we're seeing in these votes are those suburban swing counties that have typically voted Republican, think up by Cleveland, for example, that this time on this particular issue in August and now again here in November are departing from kind of Republican orthodoxy, going against what Republican leaders have wanted. They're bucking that trend on this issue. That's, to me, is the decisive difference in this election as it was in August.
And we call this a heat map because it's like the darker the red, the higher the no votes. And then the darker the green would be the higher number of yes votes. And so as you look at this, Paul, anything surprise you as what Chris was talking about?
The thing maybe to look at is in the Cleveland area, northeastern Ohio, Cuyahoga County we know is a traditionally Democratic county, and so one would expect there to be a heavy portion of the population
78%, yeah.
But look at the counties around it that are more suburban. Lorain to the left, right there, you just highlighted on it.
63%.
It's passing there. If you go to Ashtabula, which is all the way in the corner of the state, that's a traditional Republican county, but it is voting yes on issue 1.
Okay.
Which is kind of interesting. And if you look just at the whole grand sweep of things, there are a lot of light blue counties around Columbus, licking to the east, counties to the south. I think that's Lancaster. I don't remember what county it is, but
let's zoom in and see.
Yeah, Fairfield. I'm sorry.
Fairfield. Okay, there we go. Okay.
Fairfield, Again, a substantial margin. It's essentially the statewide margin for issue 1 is being reported out of Fairfield County. If you go down to the Appalachian areas, with the exception of Athens County, which is a university county, those other counties are voting heavily no.
Yeah.
And that would be expected. That's the way they voted in recent years. There are going to be some other counties. I'm just kind of looking at the map. Marion County
Oh, let's go back in. Okay.
is to the north of us. It looks like it's a light blue, which means it's a yes county.
Yeah.
Even though it's a traditionally Republican county. So
it looks like there's kind of a mixture where you point out, I mean, when you take a look at the big map, it is the major metropolitan
Yes.
areas, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo, that are the darkest greens, but you have some of the more rural areas that are also
right.
green or, really light green or
Yes.
close to it.
Yeah, and the rural areas, by and large, are older populations, more religious populations, particularly Protestant or Catholic populations, and those would be voters one would expect to be supportive of a no vote on issue 1. And so that's not really a surprise, I don't think, Chris, is it?
Yeah, and I'm trying to look for some of the surprise. It's hard to tell exactly what
Yeah.
the shading is in certain spots, but I'm looking at Knox County, for
Yeah.
example. So if we go a little northeast of Columbus here, and zoom
Knox
in.
is above the red county, isn't it?
There we go. There's Knox.
Yeah,
So
there
let's
we
see.
go.
So that's a no vote, but not by a lot. I mean, I
It's a
couldn't
very
tell for
light
sure.
pink, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's a pretty conservative county overall. Of course, we have college there with Kenyon, for example. Mount Vernon's in there and some other places. But this is a pretty rural, typically conservative county where no is winning, but not by a lot.
And Paul, it bears repeating. We talked about it in our earlier newscast today, but this being approved, it's going to be a constitutional amendment.
Yes.
Why is that so important in terms of its security for how it stands?
Indeed, and in fact, it's something the legislature cannot change.
Except
Unless
with
they
another
were-
amendment, right?
Unless they were to go onto the ballot, and it would be in 2024, which they may not want to do because that's a much higher turnout election. And they may want to avoid the presidential contest. But they could try to come back to voters on that. Although with a 57-43 margin, I think they might be reluctant to want to say to the voters, we don't trust you. You did the wrong thing on this.
And we'll see how much those percentages fluctuate,
Right.
once the vote total comes in. And again, even after tonight, vote totals aren't official.
Yes.
There's the canvassing that has to be done, and it's sometime, I believe, after November 13th, which is the deadline for absentee ballots to be received by the boards of election, and then those still have to be counted as well
And then
before
there's
it's
an
official.
official count that comes about 2 weeks after Election Day.
Okay.
I think it's the Friday, 2 weeks after Election Day. So we have to wait for that, but in a close contest, it matters. In a contest like it appears anyway, for issue 1 and maybe even issue 2, it's not going to matter
Well,
much.
speaking of issue 2, let's see how that's shaping up right now. 55.8% yes, 44.2% no, for a difference of 185,000 votes. That's 27% of precincts reporting about a 40% estimated total vote right now. And Chris, the map kind of looks similar to the other one, but maybe the greens aren't quite as dark.
Yeah. And I'm looking for some of the, we don't see a lot of really dark green or dark.
And by the
red
way,
in
this race has not been called
Yeah.
at this point, this
Right.
election.
I think one thing I'm looking at in these numbers we were talking about is the early numbers were coming in, and folks should know if you were watching at 7:30 or 7:45 and just see the first numbers. Of course, those are the early votes and absentees that were counted first before the election day votes. So we have seen those numbers come down some. It was looking like. If you look at those first numbers, it looked like issue 2 was on track for a pretty smooth victory, around 60%. That's dropped some. I mean, it's still well over 50 at this point, but I'm going to be really interested to see how that number fluctuates as we go forward. I would imagine if this race is already being called for issue 1 at,
saw
what
it
was it,
just adjust
57?
again, yeah.
Yep. It was being called for issue 1 at 57%. I'd be surprised if that many people are distinguishing between these and voting differently. I mean, obviously most people are voting the same way, not always, but most people are. That number's probably going to hold up somewhere north of 50%. But if you're the yes folks on this, you might be a little nervous right now, waiting to see more numbers come in.
Well, let's look at the contrast too, because 8 years ago in 2015, issue 3 was up as a constitutional amendment, and this is the result. And if you take off the heat map there, not a single county of Ohio's 88 counties voted in favor of legalizing recreational marijuana by a wide margin, 64% to 35.9%. And when you put the heat map back on, you can see it was varying degrees of, how big the separation was. For instance, in Franklin County, it was 63.3% to 36% yes. And you mentioned Putnam County earlier too, one of the more conservative areas. It was at 82% right there. So a total change really in the outcome this time around. Any ideas on why that is?
Well, maybe two things to say. One is that attitudes have changed towards marijuana. Partly the college-age generation now is older. Their voting turnout is higher than it was when they were in their 18, 19, 20-year-old phase. So that could be one thing. The other thing is the difference between a constitutional amendment and a statute.
Okay.
People take constitutional amendments, and should, more seriously than they take statutes, which of course can be changed.
Right. And let's go back to today's issue 2 and talk more about that, because the statute can be changed, as you mentioned, but how and by how much can it be changed, even though the voters may be approving it?
Well, the legislature could turn around tomorrow and say, we don't like the result for issue 2, and so we are going to rescind that particular statute.
Can they rescind the whole thing?
They can do it. They have to have a ballot issue, right, to do that. Maybe not.
I believe it's just regular legislation.
Maybe regular legislation.
You could imagine, let's say theoretically the legislature were to pass a law, in the next few weeks, and then immediately discover, wait a minute, we shouldn't have done that. They could go repeal their own law.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
functions the same way. I mean, voters have passed a law. Seems strange because we think of representatives passing laws, but that's what a referendum does in this case. Not a constitutional amendment, but in this case with an initiated statute, it's essentially we as the voters standing in place of the legislature and passing a law without having to get the governor's signature, right? But they could go and do the same thing. They could repeal it, they could modify it. I think it's likely, seeing this outcome, if it holds up, that maybe the legislature would try to do something of a compromise in between, but that's very hard to say.
And we're going to keep an eye on this one, of course, because it hasn't been called yet, but also, with issue 1, this is the one that a lot of people we're talking to as we talk to voters, going in and out of the polling places. Issues 1, issue 2, and a lot of people would say, issue 1 and issue 2, but definitely issue 1. So this is the one really that I think drew, people to the polls, just based anecdotally on the folks that I've talked to, and I've seen that our reporters have talked to. But again, it has been called in favor of the yeses, which have now grown to 56.3%, to noes at 43.7%. And we're looking again at this heat map of the state, showing the pockets of real heavy support for issue 1, and then the reds are the heavier support against it, and then the lighter colors, of course, being in between there. Chris, earlier we had talked about language in the proposed amendment, which looks now like it is going to be an amendment to the Ohio Constitution. One of the big questions was about the definition of viability for a fetus in terms of this constitutional amendment. What does it say about that?
Sure. So what the amendment says, I want to be careful here, make sure I get my language right. So if we look at the actual amendment, it says fetal viability means, answers this question, the point in a pregnancy when, in the professional judgment of the pregnant patient's treating physician, so it's according to the physician on a case-by-case basis, the fetus has a significant likelihood of survival outside the uterus with reasonable measures, so with whatever medical measures are available in that situation. But that's a judgment that's made by the treating physician. It doesn't really give us much in the way of standards in the constitutional language here. So that's something that you could imagine, in a given case, one physician might judge that differently than another, fetal viability. There's no exact test for that. It's a judgment that the physician would make in that case.
And also the question of parental consent, which there's actually no specific language in there, but we've heard the argument by those who are against the amendment that the word individual, when it comes to the person who would be receiving the abortion, is the gray area.
Yeah, so again, the language we get here, I'll keep it short on this one. Every individual has a right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions, including but not limited to abortion as well as contraceptives.
Why is individual, though, a confusing term?
So individual in that case, the issue that's brought up by opponents of issue 1 is that by not specifying woman or adult or something that has some direct implication of age, that it would give a right irrespective of age. So in other words, a minor, the argument made by opponents here, that a minor could obtain an abortion without notifying or gaining consent from a parent or legal guardian or anyone else. That is just an individual right. The supporters of issue 1, have not been making that case. They don't predict this is going to happen. They point to, for example, Michigan, which had very similar language, passed as a constitutional amendment last year by the voters by a similar percentage, by the way, about 57, 58%. So far, Michigan has not made any move in regards to parental consent. I would also say it does allow for restrictions. The language of this amendment allows for restrictions on abortion prior to viability, as long as that is necessary. It's in the interest of the health of the mother. And uses the least restrictive means of getting there. That's legal language that goes to the Supreme Court and how they interpret when rights can be limited in some way. You have to use the least restrictive means. In other words, kind of the least restrictive way of achieving that outcome. So if the idea here is, hey, when it comes to minors, we should make sure they know what they're getting into, understand the potential, health ramifications of this. There could be an argument, we'll see if it plays out this way, that maybe would uphold parental consent by saying that is a least restrictive means of protecting a minor's health because parents can give that advice. They also know that person's medical history in that case. So there is no clear outcome to this on whether parental rights would go away. I think probably they're not likely to, but it ultimately will come out to what courts do. Yeah.
But would that take someone challenging it? It wouldn't just be like, okay, here's what this is, and now help us.
Quite likely.
Yep.
Well, and you have situations where the parents might disagree. Let's say you have a divorced couple where one member, let's say the father, says, no, I'm not going to agree to that. The mother might say, the young woman is living in my household and she's going through agony. I'm going to allow her to have that abortion. So that will be litigated, I suspect.
Now, this is the only abortion issue on the ballot across the country today on this election day. I'd imagine right now, with this one being called in favor of the yeses for issue 1, that the networks are all talking about it and seeing what this is going to mean. So, Paul, what will this mean in terms of how the rest of the country, legislatures or advocacy groups may be looking at this to see how they may proceed in their states?
Well, I think it sends a powerful signal nationwide to groups that are pro-choice. It's going to increase their willingness to put something on the ballot to try to protect the rights of the mother in their particular state, assuming that those rights are very much limited by legislation. To people who are pro-life, on the other hand, I would think they're going to kind of do a double take and think about maybe we don't want to be as extreme as some would want us to be on this issue. And you heard this from our governor, by the way, who said quite boldly that I think it is too extreme if the heartbeat bill were to be upheld.
Well, he told me, in fact, that if they were able to defeat issue 1, that they should revisit the law and at least start to consider putting in exceptions for rape, incest, and
I think there will be some of that. Now, again, sometimes among the people who are the pro-life legislators, there's enormous pressure put on them by pro-life groups not to bend, not to yield. And in fact, some of these groups would want them to say that abortion shouldn't even be permitted at 6 weeks. It ought to be at 0. And so I think it's going to lead them to be more reluctant to push for the most extreme measures, whereas people on the pro-choice side are going to be much more interested in trying to push something that looks reasonable, like the Ohio. Well, Ohio, by the way, is Roe v. Wade, essentially. And so we're kind of getting back to Roe v. Wade in Ohio, when left to the states, as the Supreme Court wanted it to be done back when they made the decision a few years ago. When left to the states, it's interesting that Ohio now will put into the state constitution essentially Roe v. Wade. Okay.
Gentlemen, let's take another quick look here at issue 2 to see how it's shaping up. The numbers haven't changed much, although the percentage reporting is now up to 39% with 50% estimated total vote. Still, the yes is ahead by just about 10 percentage points here, maybe 11 percentage points, and a difference of 227,000 votes. I'm going to take a breath right here for a minute. We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to look at some other results right now just for a minute or two, and then we'll be back with a little bit more discussion on the major issues on the ballot this year. Issues 1 on abortion and reproductive rights, and issue 2 on legalizing recreational marijuana, which has still not been decided. So let's take a look at some other results, and then we'll be right back. And welcome back. We've got just a couple minutes left here on our special presentation on 10 TV Plus as we're taking a look at some of the big issues this evening on our election special. And right now, issue 1 has been called with 56.1% yes votes to 43.9% no. The numbers will keep adjusting. These are not final numbers by any stretch right now. It's about 52% estimated total vote. Paul, when we went into break, you mentioned that you wanted to talk a little bit about school boards, yes, because, you know, that is really local control right there. What are you seeing in some areas with the school boards?
Well, there are a lot of very heated races for school boards. I live in Worthington. There's a heated race there. There are others around the state that are that way. There are groups that are supportive of what they call parental rights. And what that usually means is the ability of parents to look at the books in the library and decide which one should be made available to students at various ages or not. One issue that's cropped up in Worthington is the issue of resource officers in the schools that had been pulled out for a while, and now there's an effort to pull them back in. But these are heated races, and interestingly, they've attracted a lot of outside money. There are national groups that are pushing for certain outcomes in these school board races. Moms for Liberty is one that is very prominent around the country, including in Ohio. And in their case, hundreds of thousands of dollars are being invested in these various races around Ohio.
All right, so we just have a couple of minutes left. Chris, final impressions for this program right now on the outcomes of issue 1 as it's being called, and then also issue 2.
Right. You know, given what we were seeing from previous results and from the polling, not surprising, the outcome here, but it is a dramatic moment for Ohio. This is a big change in policy for the state. As of this moment, abortion is legal in the state up through 21 weeks and 6 days. So with a viability standard, that's going to be roughly the same. But the heartbeat bill, now law that we were discussing before,
it's on hold.
Yep, but very likely, not definite, very likely that it would have been approved as constitutional by the Ohio Supreme Court, a Republican majority Supreme Court, shortly in the next few weeks or months, and that could have gone into effect. Now it's very clear from the language of this Constitution that would not survive a constitutional contest. So that law is not going to go into effect with this passing. I think that's pretty clear. So what does it change on the ground in terms of abortion access right now? It changes some important details relating to it, but to the big picture, the kind of cutoff point, that hasn't really changed here. But it has huge implications for what comes next. It could have been a very significant change coming soon in restricting abortion access, the window for that. Now it's going to be, as Paul was referring to, the kind of Roe standard from before. We're in roughly the same spot in terms of when that's allowed.
Paul, your final impressions?
Well, one difference, kind of following on the point that Chris is making, one difference is if you think back to the case that a lot of people are familiar with of the 13 or 14-year-old girl who was raped and had to go to Indiana to have an abortion. Big controversial issue. She now, after this takes effect, which I think is 30 days from now, she now could have an abortion here in Ohio, whereas she wouldn't have been able to under the previous laws.
Major changes, as you said, and it's being put into the Constitution today. Let's take one more check of issue 2. Still staying about the same, 55.5 to 44.5, a difference of 233,000 votes there. This election has not been called yet. Of course, we will be keeping a close eye on this. You can keep a close eye on it as well by going to 10tv.com. So that'll do it for us tonight on 10TV Plus. Please join us back here for more of our election coverage and results on the news at 11. And as I mentioned, we'll have those updated results on our website at 10tv.com. I'm Doug Petcash. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here at 11 o'clock. Have a great evening.
power of kindness and how just one act of kindness can change someone's day. He taught me to never judge a person by their appearance, but to judge them by the quality of their character, and to love even when it's not shown back, and to give trust to those who prove they were there for a reason. He's not only the best dad I could ask for, but he's also the best role model Columbus could ask for. I see him going to endless events with a bright smile and open arms, welcoming anyone who could walk through the door. He treats every child like his own, no matter where they came from or what they look like. He treats them like they have something in them that could change the world. But tonight, I'm going to leave you with one quote that he reminds me of. And that quote is, "Every person in this world deserves a chance to succeed, no matter what." So it is now my honor to introduce my father and your mayor, Andrew Ginther.
Wow, how do you follow that? Well, now you know why I am so fortunate. You know, we've been through so much in these last few years, personally and professionally. Global pandemic, reckoning around police, community relations, and continuing to deal with racism as a public health crisis. I lost both my parents, my young niece in a tragic car accident, great personal and professional challenges. But it has been my faith, these incredible members of my family, particularly my wife and daughter, who have sustained me. And the people of Columbus. So tonight I bring a heart full of gratefulness. Gratefulness to the incredible people of Columbus who have just re-elected me overwhelmingly again. And I was struck this morning as I was voting at Winterset, these incredible election officials that gave so much of their time and energy because of something they believe in. Democracy. Democracy. And I just was so proud and humbled that these folks give up so much to make sure our democratic process works. The envy of the world, I saw at work up at Winterset Elementary, and we saw it at schools and voting locations throughout this community. When some would undermine it and assault it, our neighbors stood up and protected it and gave an incredible example to the country and to the world today. I want to thank my campaign team who did an amazing job. All the city employees that do a great job for the people of Columbus every day. There is one city employee that I have to call out by name. For the last 17 years, I've talked to my wife every day and Kenneth Charles Paul just about every day. Ken has been the chief of staff during one of the most difficult times in our city's history. He's led with grace, with honor, humility. I wouldn't be here today without his incredible leadership and strength. He's going to do a great job, the CFA. Let's lift up the whole Paul family for what they have given his daughter Kennedy, his wife Angie. So this heart of gratefulness also is grateful to the people of Columbus who showed up overwhelmingly and stated very clearly and emphatically that we believe in women, we believe in their power, we believe in their freedom, and we're not going to let a group of extremists in a back room at the state capitol take that away from them. We will decide, women will decide, and the people of Columbus led the way. Friends, we have an incredible time ahead of us. It will require courage. It will require change. But this is a pro-growth community. And we believe there's always room for one more in Columbus. This century, the 21st century, is Columbus's century because the sun is always rising in Columbus. God bless you. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Okay, folks. Right, we have one more race, actually two.
My state. This is our victory. This is your victory. Reproductive rights now cemented in Ohio law.
I can't, no.
Because now it's in our Constitution. We deserve the rights to command our own bodies.
While others in the state gear up for a new fight.
Our hearts are broken tonight, but because Ohio families, women, and children will bear the brunt of the vote.
Plus, the campaign for cannabis now paying off.
This was a landslide victory for issue 2. I mean, Ohioans spoke loud, they spoke clear, they want marijuana regulated like alcohol.
10 TV is live across Central Ohio as millions react to a historic election night.
Tonight, we've spoken and we stand here united as Ohioans.
It is an historic night in Ohio. Issue 1 and Issue 2 both passed. Thanks for joining us tonight at 11. I'm Yolanda Harris.
And I'm Andrew Ginther. Tonight we have live team coverage of all the big issues and races. First, let's take a look at the results for Issue 1. Here they are on your screen. 56% for, 44% against. 10 TV's Lindsay Mills has been following this closely. She is live tonight at the Vote Yes Watch Party, where there's been a lot of celebrating tonight. Lindsay?
Andrew and Yolanda, yes, just over 2 hours ago now, when they learned the news here that Issue 1 had passed in Ohio, the room just erupted in applause, in cheering. People were hugging, people were crying, embracing when they learned the news that Issue 1 had passed. That was just after 9 o'clock. Ohioans United for Reproductive Rights expressed their gratitude for those who supported the campaign. They say this decision on Issue 1 is about Ohioans who value reproductive freedom, health care, families, and the ability to make choices that are right for them. We spoke to Lauren Blauvelt, the co-chair for Ohioans United for Reproductive Rights, as well as those here tonight for reaction when they learned the news.
It feels right. This is what Ohioans have been saying. They finally got to speak for themselves, and it's clear.
Oh, my God! Yes. So the absolutely restrictive, insane abortion ban that was passed galvanized all of Ohio. And as soon as that happened, we have to get out there and protect women.
Now that Issue 1 has passed, it will be enshrined in the state's constitution, and lawmakers cannot change it after that. It will take effect in 30 days from now, and there goes the possibility of ever having that 6-week ban. Live in Columbus, Lindsay Mills, 10 TV News.
All right, Lindsay, thank you. Now let's take a look at the results for Issue 2, which legalizes recreational marijuana in the state. And with 56% of Ohioans saying yes, this measure passes tonight. So here's 10 TV's Colin Dorsey. He joins us live at the watch party for the Vote Yes crowd. And Colin, I'd imagine the mood there was elation tonight.
Yeah, Yolanda, the pro-Issue 2 people certainly were pleased with the outcome of tonight. And if these unofficial numbers do hold, Ohio will become the 24th state in the country to legalize recreational marijuana. However, it isn't legal just yet. There's a 30-day period before this law goes into effect, and it'll be even longer before you could buy legal marijuana in the state of Ohio. We're talking this time next year, August at the earliest. It now goes into a rulemaking and planning phase. It creates the Division of Cannabis Control within the Department of Commerce. That division will then be tasked with ironing out the details of how and where marijuana will be sold in the state of Ohio. They have 9 months to do this, and then they can start issuing the first licenses. Some lawmakers, though, in the state have already indicated they plan to make amendments to this law and plan to possibly try to overturn it outright. Now, the people supporting Issue 2's the big push behind this, the coalition to regulate marijuana like alcohol, say they need to stop and recognize the will of the voters.
This is a landslide victory, and I can't believe in 2023 we're actually talking about elected officials not respecting the will of the voters and not respecting the outcome of an election. So I think that every single voter in Ohio has a right to expect that elected officials will implement and respect the will of voters.
Now, as it stands right now, those unofficial results show about 13% of voters in favor of Issue 2. or 13-point spread, that is, 55 or 56% in favor of it. And I just got this statement a few minutes ago from the Protect Ohio Workers and Family. It reads in part, "It's a disappointing development, but nothing's over. The venue just shifts from the campaign trail to the State House. Support for issue 2 fell as Ohioans learned how much it's rigged to merely benefit a handful of big commercial marijuana companies." We'll have that full statement for you up on 10tv.com later. But for now, live in downtown Columbus, Colin Dorsey, 10 TV News.
All right, thank you, Colin. Columbus City Schools had a major levy on the ballot tonight, nearly $100 million.
The district really pushing this one, but did it pass? Take a look at the results into our newsroom tonight. 55% yes, 45% no. It has officially passed. 10 TV's Carly Dion following this one closely. She is live tonight covering the issue for us. Carly.
Andrew, Yolanda, Columbus City Schools leaders say they are extremely grateful to the community for their support on this levy. Now, this was one of the closest races of the night, but Superintendent Dr. Angela Chapman says she's thankful the vote turned out in their favor. And now that this levy has passed, here's what this means for Columbus residents. It is a $7.7 mil levy, meaning it will cost property owners about $270 per $100,000 of their appraised property value. It's estimated to generate nearly $100 million. The district says the money would be used for mental health resources, athletic stadiums, classroom upgrades, as well as playgrounds and cafeterias. Tonight, Superintendent Chapman addressed just how close the vote was and what this means moving forward.
That really speaks to the work that we need to do with our community, right? There are decisions that need to be made with our community. We need to make sure that our community feels as if they are well informed about what's going on in the district, what's working and what's not working, what are the areas of improvement.
And Columbus Board of Education President Jennifer Adair also spoke to the crowd here tonight, and she ended her speech by saying, "Today, the children of Columbus won." Live in downtown Columbus, Carly Dion, 10 TV News.
Carly, thank you. Now let's get to the race for mayor of Columbus. Tonight, Mayor Andrew Ginther maintaining his seat, winning in a landslide over Joe Motil. Here, a look at those results there. 63% in favor of Andrew Ginther holding his spot tonight. 10 TV's Richard Solomon live with a reaction from the Democratic Watch Party. Richard, it was a wild atmosphere in there tonight.
Very, very wild, Andrew. Actually, the person that welcomed Mayor Andrew Ginther out for his victory speech was his daughter. And he tells me this is truly a moment that he will never forget. He says he is so thankful and so grateful to be reelected as this great city's mayor. Now, Mayor Andrew Ginther says he is heavily focused on topics like crime and violence prevention and affordable housing. I spoke with the mayor one-on-one moments after he gave that victory speech. He says this is a prime example of the people of Columbus choosing a leader that they want, a leader that they will fight for. He says he'll enjoy this moment tonight, but this is a pro-growth community, and the mayor says he's dialing in on safety, housing, and transit. But this tonight, again, is a very special moment. Take a listen.
I just was inspired today when I went to vote and saw all that, especially after the last couple of years and the polarization and partisanship that's out there. There's so many great neighbors of ours that still believe in the voting process and democracy.
And Mayor Ginther says this is a very special moment. He says to expect another budget that will be released here in the near future. It is a very good moment, but it is back to work for him. But now I want to toss it over to my colleague, Tara Jabor, who is live at Joe Motil's candidate race. Tara.
Well, Richard, Joe Motil told us that he's really proud of the number of votes he got tonight. He told us that he believes that this shows that there are really a lot of people in this city of Columbus who do not support Mayor Ginther in the way that he is running the city of Columbus. But Motil says he put his heart and soul into this campaign for the last 15 months. He says he has been overwhelmed with support, and he's proud of the way he ran this campaign.
I ran against Ginther's lack of leadership, vision, and accountability, solutions to problems, disinvestment in our neighborhoods, and the needs of our homeless and the underserved. I ran against this city's establishment in the Columbus way. I ran against profit over people. I ran to provide real solutions that can address our affordable housing crisis, and not just zoning reform, tax abatements, and a bond package. I ran to provide real solutions that can address our homeless. I provided real solutions that can reduce violent crime.
And I asked Motil what's next for him. He told us that he'll continue to be a voice for people in the community. Reporting live in Columbus, Tara Jabor, 10 TV News.
All right, thank you, Tara. Now let's get a look at some of the other results around Central Ohio tonight. This is a look at the results for the Dublin school levy. Let's take a look at that. With 53% of Central Ohioans voting there in Dublin, this issue is passing.
Now the look at the results for the Groveport school levy. That one also narrowly passing tonight, 51% to 49%.
And here, more results. This is the levy for the Columbus Metropolitan Library. That passing tonight, 63% of voting yes. So to keep track of the results all night long, just text the word results to the number on your screen, 614-460-3345, and we'll send you a link straight to your phone.